And good morning for joining this interaction. My name is Darshan Kumar Vaidya, Key Account Client Manager for Europe, Middle East and Africa for BSI. Today we are going to cover corporate governance in an emergency. Just some housekeeping notes. All attendees are muted during the session, but if you have got any questions at any point in time, do pop them in the chat and we'll answer them. And please feel free to keep the questions coming, and it will be a joy to answer and discuss with you all the questions. Also, at the end of our interaction, we have this 30-minute presentation. After that, we'll have a live question and answer session. For that, the chat questions would be very helpful for me to answer. And if you have any other questions at any point in time during the presentation as well, please do put them in the chat. This session is also being recorded, and it will be shared with you afterwards so that you can come back to it and know more. If you want to know more information, you can do that. And if you experience any technical issues during the interaction, please use the chat and our team will be able to help you very quickly. In reference to, again, just to request you to stay engaged, there'll be poll questions as well, which will take 1 minute each. And we expect that, in terms of the discussion after the poll is over on the replies. So please do keep yourselves engaged in that manner and answer all the poll questions. So moving forward, the agenda that we have got is that how governance should adapt itself in these uncertain times that we have. Sometimes we know that there was disruption in the information exchange that happened. Also, there is a disruption in supply chain. There is a disruption in accessing the critical assets sometimes. So these all can happen during an emergency. But again, in reference to how we have the benefit of the governance, if that is there, then and practice, then we ensure that governance enables the organizations to overcome those emergencies. So organizations fail because they don't take decisions. They don't know when to take decisions. Inadequate handling of the authorities and their responsibilities. Sometimes the actions are taken on the basis of incomplete or non-trusted information that is not updated in time as well. Then there is also the aspect of the structured governance at the time of emergencies. So that is also an aspect that affects the organizations, and that's how they fail. And if there is no governance framework, of course, the organizations will be struggling to implement any emergency response. Moving forward, what we can then discuss is in reference to the definitions which are given in the standards. So what is governance itself? The first and foremost information is that it is a human-based system. We as people, we are involved in the governance. We direct the organization. We oversee what is to be done, how it is to be done, when it is to be done, and then we ensure that we have traceability to account for any decisions that have been taken. What is corporate governance? So there is a difference between governance and corporate governance. Governance can be implemented in any manner in any field, but in corporate governance, we need to come up with strategies. We need to ensure that there are policies in place, because we have IT governance, we have human resource governance, we have financial governance. There are so many aspects of governance that we should undertake and understand and document for us to enable the organization to respond in a proper way through a predefined decision making structure, and then also at the same time assignment of accountabilities. So who makes the decision, how fast they make the decision, who answers if the outcome is not desirable, who answers those type of questions. The managers, the mid-level, the senior level management should be aware when to escalate those decisions, those critical governance aspects in an emergency. And then what are the aspects that we must not override, and we must adhere to that. For example, as we all know that we need to respect certain regulations, certain limitations that we place on ourselves. We must respect those, so we must understand what cannot be overridden. So again, just to align ourselves, we are discussing governance in an emergency context. We are not discussing corporate governance by itself, but we are understanding that what should the governance be looking like if there is an emergency that is happening. For example, the situation that we are in the war, the supply chain disruption. Sometimes there is a lot of activities that happen due to other suppliers being affected. For example, let's say a data center has been affected, so if we cannot access our services, our clients cannot access our services. So that can be a system outage that can happen due to that. And there can be regulations that can mandate you to ensure that quick update is done to your processes. So always when we are in an emergency, there's a time pressure because we want to continue our operations. So business continuity has to be ensured. So how to do that? We are under severe time pressure. Sometimes the situation is developing, and we know that in the present circumstances, there is a lot of variations. On one day we have something, and on the second day we have something totally different. So we have to take the decisions according to that. And yes, there is the impact on our decisions, delay if we take any decisions. But if it is not timely, then it can have a bigger consequence. And then sometimes what people do, if they do not understand everything, they will bounce everything up. So they will say that I will not take decisions, let me bounce it up. So even if they were supposed to take a decision, they will not do that, and they will keep escalating those decisions, which is not really aiding the response in a timely manner. So moving forward, in reference to the system failures, what are the various ways in which our systems can fail? Let's say that we have an organization, and that organization has an emergency that is happening. It can lead to a system failure. Why? Because everybody is escalating to one or two positions. So they are the ones who are supposed to take decisions. But suppose they are unavailable themselves. How? What would happen at that time? So that is something that has to be seen. Also, if the systems that are supposed to be giving us information do not work, if the data center itself is damaged, how we are supposed to then get information? Then also, as part of our responsibility, maybe we are senior level management, maybe we are senior, top level management. If we are unable to be clear when it is our responsibility to take the decisions and when we should escalate. If we are not clear, then of course that can lead to system failure, because then everything will be delayed, and that will create a lot of consequences. But the good thing is, we can run scenarios, we can do drills, we can do tests, and all these failures are predictable. You can build them into the scenarios, and you can then try and simulate and see how the organization responds. Moving forward, we will have a poll question. The poll question is for 1 minute, as I said earlier. The question is, which of these governance failure modes is most familiar to your organization? For example, unclear escalation triggers, or nobody knows when to escalate, or there's a decision authority gap, or information delay, or there is over centralization. So please participate and let us know what you think. So the results have come, and the top is the number one failure mode is the unclear escalation triggers, lack of clarity in when to escalate. So that is there. Moving forward, what is the best way forward in that case then? So there is a corporate governance framework. We have to always balance. What should we be balancing? We must balance the speed of response. We must control the consequences in an emergency, and we must have the resilience to bounce back after the emergency is over, to either in a better shape or in the same way that we were at the time the emergency was occurring. So we have to balance these, and we have to ensure that there is a good degree of steps that we have, which is allocated to all these three categories: the speed, the control, and the resilience. Very important for the governance, good governance framework. We need to ensure that we have the framework ready, like the documentation, when the decision should be taken, what constitutes an emergency. And remember, emergencies can also be different levels. Not every emergency will require coordination to be escalated or decisions to be escalated. Maybe the impact is very low, and some emergencies can develop over a time. For example, they are small, but over a period of time they can escalate in their level of severity. So we must ensure that we have our framework which is designed to overcome this scenario, where if the emergency impacts are increased, then our governance system is also able to handle the consequences accordingly and respond with the necessary resources accordingly as well, and involve the governing body ultimately to direct, oversee, and ensure that there is a good degree of steps and decisions being taken. It also ensures that there is an accountability, very very important aspect. Sometimes accountability is not that much considered in the governance. From our experience that we interact with many organizations that have implemented even even the ISO 37000 framework, they have implemented. They're very very mature, but sometimes the way in which they trace the accountability, sometimes that is not very very clear. So that is something that all organizations should be focusing on as well. If they have mature systems, accountable systems, absolutely great. And also in reference to how we distinguish between the top management and between the governing body roles. So management role is to take day-to-day decisions. The governing body role is to maintain an oversight in a non-emergency regular situation. So how that is done, and in an emergency, how that is escalated, and then the management hands over some of their powers to the governing body, or governing body then takes over and then gets a bit more involved and at a greater frequency, because sometimes the governing body, the board of directors, will only meet like once in 3 weeks, and that's what will be done. In the moving forward, how we can build a good system. First is we should have our intent. Why the decision should be taken? What are the main ways? What is our strategy going to be for ensuring that there is effective governance? We must realize why we should have a good governance system. If we do not have good governance, what is the impact? So we must ensure that we are aware. If we do not take decisions, what is going to be the consequence? Then a clear decision matrix that has to be there. Technology dependency, if there is lack of system redundancies that we have built in, then that can expose our organization. uh, uh, and at the same time, we know what is an ERM system, enterprise risk management system. We must capture the risks. We must define what is our LRP level, as low as reasonably practical level, and then what is our risk appetite, we must define. And then based on the risk thresholds that we define, we can then build an effective governance model. Plus, it is very important to note that if there is a conflict between two data systems, which system should we trust? What can be the source of truth? So those scenarios, testing, simulations can help us determine that. So sometimes it is in an emergency, it is not like we have a week or we have days to take decisions. Sometimes it is just few hours, few minutes that we have only. So in that, the speed at which the decisions are taken really, really matter. In reference to the way in which we have a is my mic not clear? Am I not audible? Um is my voice not coming? Oh, it is coming. All right. So I was just seeing that in the chat, so that's why. Uh, weakness in any one element can actually destabilize the entire system. So that is in reference to how we can build a good governance system. Then when we move forward, we have talked about governing body. What is a governing body? Governing body is board of directors. It can be a crisis management teams, escalation points. It can be that the crisis management center is established, which is empowered to take decisions. That can play a role of a governing body, which coordinates all the decision. Sometimes it can be that if you have a group of companies, the board of directors of that particular company does not play the role that it usually plays. It actually involves the group level board of directors to execute that role of the governing body. So it depends on the scenario how the governing body role is executed. But what are their roles? What do they do? They define what are the decisions that they will take, what are the decisions that they will delegate, and what are the decisions they expect the management to take. Second is they before an emergency occurs, because we remember we are talking about a governance system that can handle emergency. So this is a pre-emergency phase. So we must approve the thresholds at which the governance, the governing body should be informed, and the decision should be escalated to them for the decision making approval. Then, as we spoke just a while ago, that there are some non-negotiables, like, for example, our values. We must not compromise. We must not compromise rules and regulations that we have, the laws of the country. So we must adhere to all those requirements, all those non-negotiable constraints, and take decisions accordingly. Uh, the decision should be based on information. As we discussed, that information sometimes can be unclear, sometimes can be misleading, sometimes it's incomplete. So we must understand through our scenarios, through our testing, that what is that information that is at a minimum level based on which a decision is taken. We don't need to have very accurate information. If such information is available, we can take decision based on that. So, we must also ensure that as in when the emergency happens, at what point in time will the management, top management involvement will be less, and the board of director involvement will be more? At what point in time that would take place? At what point in time would you say that board of directors, please meet more often, or please come at a certain location, or meet online and get information and take decisions? At what point in time should we involve them, and should involve them at a greater frequency than what they are normally involved in? So at what point in time should that happen? And that we must also understand that board of directors have different backgrounds, they come with different specialities and different skill sets. So how to ensure that they understand that what is the requirement in case there is an emergency that is happening? So education of the governing body members is also important. Board of directors, they need to understand in an emergency what is to be done, how they should understand the technicalities, the information that is presented to them, and what they are expected to do at that time. So they should have this access to this information. If they are unable to get those information, then they must also have a predefined list of experts, specialists that they can consult in a very quick manner to ensure that they can get the required information available to make a decision. So in crisis, in emergencies, sometimes let's say in this case in UAE, it happened that the information was not very clear because the data centers, the servers, they were damaged itself in some cases. So how to overcome these scenarios? What if there is in reference, there are several reports, which one report says do this and this is the correct information, this was the consequence, and another report says this is where we are and this is the present situation, and they are both conflicting to each other. What do we do then? And information, the situation is very rapidly changing. Sometimes yesterday what it was, today is different, day after tomorrow is different, tomorrow is different. So that's, sometimes it can lead to very, very confusing situations. In case of that, we should prepare for these scenarios. We should have testing, simulations for these scenarios, so that whenever we take decisions, even though the data is incomplete or maybe delayed, or maybe it is we don't know what source of truth data should we rely on, but we should ensure that we have a certain way, through our simulation we gain that experience to say that, okay, if this is the level that is reached, this information is sufficient for us to take a decision. But many a times we do assumptions. We don't know everything about an emergency. So we assume things. We say, okay, maybe this has happened, maybe that has happened. Sometimes we hear things and we understand that that is correct without any evidence. So we must document clearly what are our assumptions. Why? Because at a later stage, we want to improve our responses. Then we must also maintain transparency in our reporting so that we can understand, we can give that feeling to everyone that the we can rely on this information. Then we come to the governing technology. What role technology? We live in a world of artificial intelligence. How and what role can the technology play in the times of an emergency? If we rely too much on technology, that can really be, instead of helping us, it actually creates an obstacle for us. So it can be something very critical for us to maintain then. So we must ensure there are redundancies upon redundancies that we build in that case. If there is a system failure, then what do we do? So I'm sure you know that in reference to sometimes if there are operational failures, if the systems are not working, if the softwares they are not working, then we have a way, a plan B that we can go for, provided the governance enables us to take those decisions. And if there are any, emergencies, as I said, they keep on changing from level to levels. So in that case, our responses also should be able to meet those expanding consequences and expanding emergencies. Let's say our operations are shut down. What time should we define that, okay, this is acceptable as a shutdown, that is not an emergency, but if it goes beyond a certain time, then it becomes an emergency for us. Sometimes it can be very less, sometimes it can be slightly more, depends on what our organization's acceptable thresholds are. Then sometimes we also take a decision that, okay, it doesn't matter if this has happened, let us continue the operations. It doesn't matter whether this is an emergency or not. We will tackle it as it goes along. So sometimes that has to be approved, that whether we should now, shut off and, take care of the emergency, or operations can continue while we take care of that emergency. So that has to be something simulated and tested repeatedly. Uh, In various cases, as I mentioned, let's say that you have a central data server and redundancies are not built in, then of course, the it will be very, very critical in that case for us to maintain those assets. But then it is always good governance, business continuity practice that we always build redundancies so that we keep the information coming for us to take those decisions. Remember, that this is we are not talking about IT decisions. It is like the governing body, the board of directors, who may not be having IT background. Those are the people who are supposed to take these decisions. So now the next poll question is shortly coming up. So in your organization, who owns the decision to shut down or continue running a critical system during an emergency or a crisis? So in the responses are that in our organization, we are very clear who will take that decision. Sometimes in some organizations, the IT will take the decision, but they should take approval. It is ambiguous in some organizations, or in some organizations, we have no idea what is to be done. So as we have a minute to respond, but only now few seconds remain. So that is very, very interesting that most of the participants are saying that there is a very good clarity on who should decide when we should stop or when we should continue a critical system. Very, very good to note that. So what happens in an emergency? Sometimes we note that security can become very critical nowadays, especially. Security is something that can really affect our capabilities, our way of response, and maybe the area cannot be accessed. Maybe there is, some sort of bad actors that can come in and cause an emergency. So how should we prepare for that? And nowadays it is shifting from physical to digital. So it can be through cyber attacks, it can be through ransomware, it can be through various ways in which these issues can happen and lead to a security failure. So first is we define what is our risk appetite. Risk appetite means in our ERM, enterprise risk management system, we define what is our acceptable level of risk for a particular scenario and what is our acceptable level. If we are not at that acceptable level, it means that we should build more control measures and we must then evaluate the effectiveness of these control measures to then see that these are implemented, and ultimately then the residual risk gets lower or as low as reasonably practicable. So it meets our risk appetite. Again, as we discussed in the previous instances, that we must know when to escalate the decisions to our governing body, and that the decision authorities are predefined rather, because we are talking about a pre-emergency scenario, and we know what is critical for us, which systems are critical, what are our basic systems that should still function for us to ensure that decision level information is received as far as possible. And then we align those strategies, those policies. We make sure that when we have a, let's say, a cyber security policy, or a security policy, or an information security policy, we then ensure that it aligns with our business priorities. So at that time, we play that role in ensuring that there is adequate security governance. Sometimes the failures are interconnected. Let's say there is an attack on a system. That system can lead to failure in other operational aspects. Then that can create additional failures. So sometimes, as I mentioned, the emergencies can start small and they can keep on getting escalated as the time goes and lead to one failure after the other. So it can also be the case where, let's say, IT takes a decision to shut down a system. It can impact another system. So those type of impacts should also be studied in our simulations that we uh, uh, test ourselves through those scenarios. We must ensure that there is integration, there is defined policies, there are defined documentation, there is a defined framework, and there are various scenarios that are defined. So if this happens, this is the way that we will respond. Because remember, the governance structure can also vary from one emergency to another emergency. So it may not be that for all emergencies the same structure will be relevant. So we have to ensure that we define the structures according to the emergency, so that we have the best team available to take those decisions. So that is what is the meaning of predefined crisis governance structure. Also, after an emergency is over, what do we review? We review the KPIs. How did we perform? Did we perform according to the predefined targets, or did we perform below, or did we perform beyond? So we must ensure we know what, according to our organization, is a good governance during an emergency, so that we understand that during the emergency we responded adequately and our systems worked, and the KPIs or results also demonstrates that aspect. So this is done in a post-incident review and the recovery effort. And risks are constantly changing. I was there in an organization just very recently for ISO 37000 interaction, and we noted that they have built into their risks profile the risks due to the situation, the geopolitical situation that we are in. They had incorporated all those aspects in their governance. So they reviewed in March only, they had introduced these, tested their response, come up with some control measures, and the actions are still ongoing, of course, but then they know what is to be done. That is what is important. So what are the three governance loops? There is a structure, three governance loops. So what does it look like? First is there is a decision loop. So loop means it is going in a circle, right? So first is that we have a situational awareness as a governing body. What should we do now? Then we know who will take decisions. So after we know that we should take decisions, then we take decisions we based on our authority in a timely manner, and then we communicate those decisions. Then again, we become aware, we change those decisions, amend, review, and then again we take new decisions. This is due to rapidly developing emergency situations. So this loop keeps on repeating itself. Then there is another loop, which is an oversight loop. So there is, what is the role of the governing body in that case? So they make the decisions for the delegation in an emergency, that okay, this team is empowered, that team is empowered, and then they only approve very few of the situations, and they maintain an oversight, although at a greater frequency. During an emergency they meet very often, so it is a real time real time visibility for the board is there, because then they are frequently involved. Then they keep on reviewing the risk. So this is an oversight capability, right? And then they have that, okay, this decision is taken, or we need to change that one, we need to amend this particular aspect. So this is an oversight. They maintain that we are adhering to the rules and regulations, we are adhering to our requirements, we are adhering to our values, and we are responding according to that. After the decisions, after the implementation, after the knowledge that there is an emergency, we record everything. So what does it help us in? It helps us in feedback. So what is the feedback means? That there is, we ask ourselves this question: is our response working? Is our response adequate? Are we able to overcome the consequences? Are we able to minimize the consequences, or do we need to adjust something? So that is what is the aspect that is there. And then learning and correction, so feedback loop is occurring. And this can also be in a post emergency scenario, that a feedback loop also is implemented. Moving forward, we have a poll. So again, you have a minute. The question is, which of these three governance loops is the most challenging for your organization? Is it the decision loop? Is it the oversight loop? Or is it the feedback loop? Or we don't have any structured loop. Please keep the answers coming. 10 seconds more. Excellent. Thank you for your responses. And the top one that is the most challenging is the feedback loop, where after the emergency is there, then what can be those instances where we can review, adjust, improve our governance structure. So in relation to, in short, overall summary, that in the case of an emergency, especially, I remember we are talking about governance in an emergency situation. So time pressure, there's resource constraint, information clarity issues. So at that time, we are very good in clearing who should make what decisions. We define what is our risk appetite, what can we take as a risk, and then we document our assumptions. We test through different scenarios, we stress test our framework, and we run many simulations under time pressure, and that then creates a very good governance framework. And of course, if we get feedback from our suppliers, from our stakeholders, that is also very, very good in building a very robust governance structure. So I want to give you two examples very quickly before we head to the questions. There was a baby product company facing a regulatory mandated product recall. So they had one of the baby products, and when the children are involved, there's a greater regulatory pressure. that we must respond very quickly. So at that time, what happens? What did they do? So what they did was, at that time, it was very clear to the top level management that the or the team that was involved in the regulatory communication, that we need to escalate it. They escalated rapidly. The top management got involved. They got the governing body involved, the board of directors. Board of directors approved the whatever decisions to recall the product was there, and they communicated very clearly all the scenarios. They got involved regularly, met in this case they met every 2 3 days, against 3 months in a normal situation, and they very rapidly overcame this situation. So yes, there was an impact on the trust within of the customers in their organization. It was there. Their customers, their product sales declined for a time being, but because they responded in a very quick manner, they knew when to escalate, they had a very robust governance structure, they were able to overcome this, and then the sales also went up. It took some time, but it came on the right side and gained in reputation as a result of that. Then there is a scenario of a bank, which was a leading bank, now no more. It faced a liquidity crunch. What happened then? People thought, oh, this is a temporary situation. We will get the liquidity. There is going to be liquidity. Someone will take decisions, and we will have the money. So they did not take any action. They did not escalate. They thought everybody knows everything, so someone should be taking decisions. But no decision was taken. Then ultimately, the liquidity crunch resulted in many other issues. Customers started to withdraw money because now the news media picked it up, and then ultimately the bank failed. So that is another scenario where the governance structure failed simply because people didn't know when to escalate, people didn't take timely decisions and addressed those scenarios as the emergency got bigger and bigger. So with that, the key references that you can refer to is OECD corporate governance principles, World Economic Forum, or national cybersecurity centers as well, because now it is very important for us to ensure that our governance system, IT based systems, are also very robust. Then there is a BSI guidance on organizational resilience that is available on our website. And then you can also read our insights on the ISO 37000, which is the governance guide standard. So with that, we come to the questions, and let me go through the questions. Yeah. So I'm just going to read the question. First is from Abir. Uh, Oh, well, okay, yeah. These are the questions. Sorry. Yes, so sorry. First question is from Patricia. So she asks that how can the organization ensure that risk management, business continuity, and emergency response activities, they remain aligned with the corporate governance principles while your organization is still making those rapid decisions. So how we can ensure that this all is something that is aligned with each other in a rapidly evolving governance or emergency situation. What we must ensure is that we stress test our governance frameworks very frequently. We also stress test the increasing emergencies. For example, it escalates from level 1 to level 2. Remember in the bank that the first of all, it was a liquidity crunch. So it started small, which could have been addressed by pumping additional liquidity, seeking communication, telling customers not to withdraw money at that time, or making some restrictions on the withdrawal. Something like that could have been done. But because in a rapidly evolving situation, they did not do that, then ultimately the failure happened. So it was a failure of risk management, it was a failure of business continuity, and it was a failure of responding to that particular liquidity crunch, which resulted in a crisis. So how to ensure that these are aligned? We should develop a framework, a governance framework, which then talks about IT governance. It integrates with the governance for operational. It also integrates with financial governance. It integrates with the ERM or enterprise risk management framework. It aligns with the business continuity plans that we have, because in business continuity plans there is a requirement, if we implement the business continuity framework, we as an organizations would always have that requirement of testing, of simulating various business continuity scenarios. For emergency response plans also, we periodically test, we simulate. How to ensure this is all aligned? This is all aligned in a structured manner through a crisis management center, where different team members from business continuity, from emergency response teams, from risk management, from the governing body, from the top management, from operational areas, they all sit together and make decisions. So how we build that crisis management center is then can create a lot of alignment. And also then we must ensure that, to summarize, the corporate governance principles are on communication, receiving information, dissecting that information, ensuring who will take that decision, because if a lot of people are there, we must know who is the decision maker, and that is how we create alignment during a crisis. When we go back to the questions, there is a second question, that if an organization, very good question actually, if an organization does not have any board of directors, but there is an executive committee, which itself is chaired by the chairman of an organization, but there is no clear audit or GRC or governance, risk and compliance oversight, then in this case, how can we strengthen the structure and the role of this committee to oversee corporate governance? They can act as the board of directors, or they can act as the governing body. How they can do that? That we should define what their roles and responsibilities are during an emergency. We define what decisions they should take versus what are the decisions that the lower management should take. Lower in a board level means top management. So top management, if you have a committee, then below the committee comes the top management. So which decisions should be taken by top management, which decisions to be taken by the committee. So that is what can be the way forward. And then the second aspect in that is that we must train the executive committee members on what to do in case emergency happens. What are the various ways in which the information can be escalated to them, and let them participate in the scenarios, in the testing, in the simulations. You can pass them the reports of the scenarios. If they have any comments, they can amend that, and they can provide you with necessary guidance on how to improve in alignment with their requirements. We must ensure that they are aware, they are trained, they are informed, so that they can meet on a more frequent basis as required to tackle an emergency. So it is important that even though there is no board of directors, the committee can assume the role of the board of directors, or we can, we don't need to use that term board of directors. We can use this term committee. The committee assumes the role of the governing body in the emergency. And how we can strengthen, just to summarize, first point, define the roles and responsibilities. Second is they should know when to take decisions and what decisions they have to delegate, what decisions they have to take. Second is agree on a time frame to meet more often, so that they can maintain an oversight on the decisions implementation. Remember there is a review loop, so they can do that as well. And then the last is training them, that we must ensure that they are informed, well trained, so that they can respond accordingly. Thank you, Lahib, for your question. Now, third question is with new questions are above. Okay, Abir has asked a question. Now, what triggers this transition from emergency governance to normal operations, and how this is managed? Very good question, Abir. What it does is, what the question is, that after an emergency has happened and now the emergency has been tackled, now how to transition from the emergency to the normal mode? When to declare emergency is over. So at that time, when we have the all the actions that are that arose as a result of our decisions, of our review, as and when all the actions that have been closed, as and when that happens, majority of the actions, if there is an action that takes very long time, then that can be something that can be tackled in a normal mode as well, but in a escalated time frame. But apart from those exceptional time frame requiring actions, all other actions are implemented. All the consequences that are resulting from the emergencies, all those consequences have been managed, and they have been adequately addressed at the time when we know that now the operations are back. The KPIs that are there in a normal situation, the results match our expectation, or the pre-emergency thresholds are being achieved. At that time, we know that now we are back to normal operations. Until that happens, emergency review, emergency scenarios, emergencies feedback should continue. That feedback loop should continue to be implemented. Until that time, the board should get involved, the governing body should get involved, and they should then ensure that there is a revision, there is a oversight, there is a proper review of the actions that limit the consequences due to the emergency taking place. So sometimes it can be very short, depending on the emergency. It can be within a week that the emergency is declared to be over. But sometimes it can take months to be tackled. So now we come to another question that is from I think not very clear, Abir as well. Yeah. So how does organization ensure the continuity of governance if key board members and executives are unavailable? Very good question again. And I covered that if you recall in the beginning, I think I mentioned that what happens if we escalate the decisions to one or two members only, what happens if they are unavailable? They are in a someplace else where there is no access for them to be communicated. So in that case, what happens? So that's why we should always ensure that there are clarity that we must have in our decision making structure. We test those scenarios, we build this situation as well. So we assign what is a decision maker, then we assign based on our scenarios or simulation, we assign who is the second person who will take the decision if this person is unavailable. So we define. Remember, in HR, we do succession planning. For example, if there is a critical position that leaves, well, who will replace? So there is in HR, there is succession planning where the second person takes over because they have been adequately handed over, trained, they have the same skill sets almost, and almost the same level of understanding of the role. So they can take over in a smooth manner. So that is what is then going to be the way forward, where in which we have the same second or a replacement person in case there is a lack of availability for a decision maker. But this should be not happening in most of the case where there are only one or two decision makers, because then it is very difficult to then say that okay, this person will take over, because then there are a lot of persons who are in that same level. So in that case, how that should happen? So it is always best to have a group of individuals. And remember, in governance, if one person is taking a decision, it is and without any inputs, that can also create a situation which is undesirable. Although that person is responsible to make decisions in case there is lack of consensus. But if there is consensus, then it means that they should take a decision as a group. So in committee case, there are committee members in place and they can take those decisions and they can then get involved. So if one committee member is not reachable, another committee member is not reachable, the rest of the committee members can assume those roles. So that should be the way forward in which we have a plan to distribute the decision making. And if there is only one person or two persons, which is not really a good situation, so then we must define who is the second level that should take the decision. Now there is another question that has come in. Let me just see if there is another question. I think no more questions. So thank you so much for your participation today. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day. Thank you.